Welcome to the Home Business Podcast with Richard Captain Henderson, publisher of Home Business Magazine, and Sherilyn Colleen, managing editor. This how-to show helps you successfully operate your home-based business.
Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Captain Henderson, your skipper at Home Business TV.
And I'm Shelby, your co-host.
Let's secure, foresee, and get underway. It's that dreaded time of year. It's tax time.
So what does that mean for you as a small business owner? It's time to get ready.
The most important thing you can do right now is plan out all the things that you need to do.
Getting ready for tax time isn't a big thing. It's a lot of little things that relate from one to the next.
To help us get ready for tax time, we are joined today by Barbara Weltman, business expert and author of the Home-Based Business Startup Guide.
So greetings, Barbara Weltman. Welcome to the Home Business Podcast. Say hello to our listeners.
Well, thanks so much for having me today.
Hi, Barbara. I guess you're calling in from a cold winter day in Vero Beach.
Not quite cold winter. It's sunny and gorgeous.
Oh, man.
Awesome.
I guess you got your one day of 30 degrees just so you know what it's like.
Just to remember, right?
Yeah. Gotta have one day. So let's get to know you better first. We all know you from our book that you authored, the Home Business Based Startup Guide. Tell us a little bit about the book and the big ideas for small business.
2022 is shaping up to be a monster year for business startups.
Yes.
With the pandemic sort of waning now, people are starting their own businesses. They're leaving corporate America. They want to have their own thing going. And the book is designed to help people get started step by step to make sure that they don't overlook some of the important things that need to get done so they may have a great idea, but unless they do some of the rudiments of running a business, they can run into trouble and they may not be able to sustain their activities. So that's what the book is aimed at.
One of the things I really like is that it's got nice, efficient, simple checklists that help to keep you on track.
Exactly.
You can find out more information on the book by going to the website or the podcast page, and we'll provide more information on that towards the end. First, let's talk tax. Start off with tax deadlines. Barbara, what deadlines should we know about right now? So, what are some of the more important deadlines for a small business owner?
The tax deadline you have to pay attention to depends on how you set up your business. So if you're a partnership or limited liability company with 2 or more owners, the tax deadline that you have to pay attention to is March 15. That's the deadline for filing your 2021 business return. And it's also the deadline for asking for an extension if you just need more time. It's an automatic thing as long as you submit the paperwork on time. The other important deadline is, we're so used to hearing April 15th, but this year it's April 18th, or in fact, April 19th for those in Maine and Massachusetts for filing your individual return. So business owners, for pass-through entities, or if you're a sole proprietor, this is the key date for you to report your share of business income on your personal return or ask for a filing extension. It's also the deadline for paying up on your taxes. So even if you get an extension, it doesn't give you more time to pay your 2021 taxes. So be sure to pay as much as you owe to minimize any interest and penalties. And it's also the date for filing your first estimated tax payment for 2022. So a lot of things happening.
I mean, that's like less than 2 months away.
I know. It's so crazy to think about it.
I forgot all about that March 15th deadline. Now I know why my accountant was sending me that email. I'm like behind on it because he needs a couple of weeks to get it all together.
Sure thing.
So wow. So it's important to go over these deadlines because they're basically here when you're talking about within a month.
Oh, for sure.
So the important point there, I guess you should figure out pretty quickly here if you're going to be able to make the deadlines. And I imagine it's better to file an extension as soon as you can, or rather than wait till the last minute.
Precisely, because doing that will avoid any penalties for late filing. But again, be sure to pay the taxes, because that extension won't give you more time to pay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so kind of going off of that, Barbara, we should plan out tax strategies in advance, obviously, but is there anything one can still do to reduce 2021 taxes? Like any write-offs, any advice kind of around that?
Yeah, even though the year is over, it's still not too late to take certain actions that are going to favorably impact your tax return. So for example, if you don't have a qualified retirement plan, you can still set one up for your business.
Sure.
You can do that up to the extended due date of your return. Of course, there are lots of different types of retirement plans to choose from. A SEP, for example, is a plan, and it's kind of easy to do, simple. That's where the name comes from, Simplified Employee Pension. And if you have employees, however, you're going to have to contribute to them. This isn't one of those plans where employees put money in. Another thing to do is to put money into your IRA if you're eligible to do so. That has a deadline of the April 18th deadline, regardless of whether you get a filing extension. So again, just watch the deadlines, but it's great to put the money into these plans, because not only are you going to be saving for your own retirement, getting a current write-off, but depending on your income, you may also be able to double dip in taxes and get a tax credit for the retirement savings. So you have to check that out. Other things you might be able to do is make smart tax elections, because in certain instances, you have choices on how to handle costs. So for example, if you buy equipment, you can depreciate it over a number of years. You may be able to expense it using a bonus depreciation or first year expensing, or instead of putting it on your balance sheet, you just treat it as a material and supplies and just write it off. So again, lots of choices on how to treat various expenses.
So like tax elections, we're not talking about who we're going to vote for here in 2020. You're talking about if you've got some kind of a transaction, you can categorize it a certain way, and working with your accountant, there may be a tax advantage there.
Precisely. And frankly, the choices that you make impact not only this year, but years to come. So you have to kind of take a multi-year approach. And again, a tax professional is someone who can advise you on this.
Yeah, I can't bring that out enough. I know you're a lawyer and, we work with an accountant, but you should always seek out professional advice. I mean, as the business owner, you got to make the call on what you do, but make sure you incorporate in professional help. And so they, kind of keep you within the rails. But here's one subject I love, which is the home office deduction. And it does have that reputation of being a red flag. Barbara, how can one reduce the risk of an audit with the home office deduction?
Well, first of all, don't be afraid, because right now, more than 60% of all businesses in the U.S. are home-based. So it's not really an audit red flag.
I think 60% of the employees are home-based.
Well, not beyond that. The businesses themselves are being conducted from home. That's how many people are running businesses from home. And therefore, the IRS is not auditing every taxpayer. So it's not an audit red flag anymore, not like it used to be. But just make sure that you know the rules, that you have to use your office has to be your principal place of business or meet certain other conditions. And the space that you use for the office has to be used regularly and exclusively for business. So you can't use your kitchen table and claim it as a home office. It has to be a separate space. It doesn't have to be an entire room or even partitioned or anything like that, but it has to be dedicated to business use. And then you have to decide how you're going to write off your costs, because there are two options. You can deduct your actual expenses, decide, let's say 10% of your living space is used for business, then 10% of your rent or 10% of your utilities, 10% of your mortgage, your real estate taxes, and so on would be part of your home office deduction. Or you can use a simplified method, which is sort of, think of it like the standard deduction for home office expenses. And it's just a set amount that the IRS has created for you to be able to figure your home office deduction.
That's interesting. So you can take a little bit off your rent then? You can write off like a little bit of your rent? Like that's like utilities?
Yes, if you qualify as for the home office deduction, all of those costs get factored into the deduction.
Now, Shelby, that doesn't mean you can write off 80%.
I know. I was thinking I'm going to write off my couch, my Hulu, Netflix, like everything, the rent, all the furniture.
Not quite.
So how long's the IRS
not
simplified method been around? That I guess that one slipped my mind. I know about
I think it's been around since for about 9 years now.
Oh, okay.
But they haven't changed the amount. So it's a per square foot up to a certain amount, and that's all you can take. So basically, if you have all the receipts for all the costs that you incurred in your home, you can probably figure which is the better option. Most people don't keep all personal expenses the way they track their business costs. So
right, exactly. And so I guess kind of going off of that, like Barbara, what do you recommend on who should actually prepare the taxes? Like, should I do my own return, use a tax pro? Do you recommend not finding one on Craigslist?
Oh, don't do your own taxes.
well,
That's a setup question.
Yeah.
Actually, it really depends on each individual and this particular situation, how complex the return is, how comfortable you feel with the whole process. I mean, there are some people, numbers are just an anathema. They don't want to even think about numbers, and they'd rather have somebody else do it. If you choose to use tax software, it's very good and it walks you through the process. But again, how much time do you want to devote to preparing your return versus paying a professional to do it? If you do prepare your own return, you might opt to have a professional review it before you submit it. The one thing I would caution people today, given the pandemic situation and what's been happening at the IRS, absolutely positively e-file. Do not submit a paper form. They still have piles of paper forms that haven't been processed from the prior year.
Wow.
And especially if you're going to be getting a refund, make sure that you direct deposit it into an account, because again, waiting for that paper check may take way too long. So
yeah, from experience, there's so many times my accountant has come up with stuff I never would have thought of that's legitimate. It's a different way of doing it. And I really think it's the ultimate of being penny wise and pound foolish to try to lawyer or accountant lawyer or accountant your stuff.
Well, also,
you should always get some advice on that.
Even more than that, it's always a question of, and this goes from more beyond just taxes, but engaging any professional, that you know your business and you should be spending your time on your business. And it's not cost effective to spend your time doing something that somebody can do faster and better than you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think when people get lured into the false pretense or whatever, that things are getting so automated, you just plug in a few numbers into a form and it spits it out. But there's still some reasoning that has to go on with accounting, and
plus
we make the
laws change every year, and we have so many new laws to deal with, and you may not be aware of all the new things.
There's a law that changed 9 years ago with the IRS simplified method, and I wasn't aware of that. So,
it's interesting. I heard that some universities, they have the students that are in like accounting and finance do your taxes for free. So I don't know like what the students really get out of it, but I mean, that's free taxes. So I don't know how accurate it'll be, but would you recommend that or no?
There are certain free programs for preparing personal returns, but there are no free programs that I know of for preparing business returns. And maybe on the colleges they're doing that, but the IRS sanctioned programs such as the VITA program, and there's certain other programs that offer free tax assistance are meant for individual returns.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is we can recommend get an accountant at least involved to, like Barbara's saying, look it over before you submit it. But whether you know you do your taxes or not, you should still be keeping track of bookkeeping all year. Barbara, any advice on keeping the books and getting your books ready for tax time?
Well, sure. So you're required to keep books and records if you're in business. It's not an option. The good news is that you don't have to be a numbers person. You don't have to be great at math to be able to do this. All you have to do with the various software, cloud, or mobile apps for accounting purposes is just to put in your income and expenses. When you pay for something, you make a record of it. When income flows in, you note that as well. And the programs do the calculations for you. Even better, if you use certain programs, they tie into tax prep software. So you can just basically,
Right.
you said it, you can hit a button and populate your entire tax return with the information that's already in your good books and records. The thing about the good books and records is, and I think people don't understand this, is that may not be sufficient. That in certain instances, the tax law requires you to do more. For example, when it comes to travel or using your personal car for business mileage, you have to have a separate record. It can be an app, it can be a written record, but you do need to note certain information and have that available. And just noting that a trip costs you $2 is not going to fly.
Yeah. I guess if you
Exactly.
have, if you've got ways to simplify it, I actually, it's a good point you brought that up. I actually stopped using travel deductions and mileage. Just got to the record keeping was just so burdensome. And then gas went down to $1 a gallon for a while, and I got away from it. But I guess if you do figure out ways to use some of the apps that are out there, it can simplify it and set up
It can
automatically the
simplify
records you need.
greatly. It automates it, and it really is. It's really takes no time and no expertise to be able to manage it that way.
I think one of the key things you're saying though is you got to have that paper trail. It might be electronic, but you still need that paper trail, and don't take the risk that you're not going to need it, because you might need it 3 years from now when you get an audit, and get that in place now.
That's a great point. And I think, just to emphasize, many people who are starting out in business don't think to set up a separate business bank account, separate credit card, and they kind of commingle all their finances. And it's kind of impossible to separate, not only at tax time, but down the road when you have to look back 2 or 3 years if the IRS questions something on your return.
We need to have you back for a finance 101. Yeah, there are so many minefields in getting started that it's kind of crazy. People would, maybe not really, like if you don't make the decision to do it, it just sort of happens, and you don't, well, I'll just pay it out of personal and remember to reimburse myself. And no, that'll go downhill pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the IRS does everything they can to make sure it's maybe as difficult as possible to get, deductions. So I'm curious, one of the most important tax issues is to not miss any legitimate deductions. Barbara, are there any common deductions that home business owners often miss?
I don't think that they necessarily miss the deductions outright, because when you're in business, just about every expense you incur is going to be a write-off, one way or the other, whether it's a deduction, a tax credit, maybe it's a question of knowing how to handle the expense, because timing issues come into play. The substantiation of the expense comes into play. And so those are where the mistakes happen, that you don't optimize the write-off, and that's what you want to do. You want to get the most bang for your buck here, and understanding what the choices are can really make a big difference.
I think that stems back to getting with that accountant or financial advisor and having them go over your business and talk about some of the expenditures you're going to have. And I think your accountants could give you some really, really good advice there.
I do too.
Well, Barbara, when your taxes are finally ready, any tips for this filing season?
Well,
Any
just to
tips?
emphasize again, that you do want to submit you want to e-file. Also, what I've been talking about is primarily on the federal level, but also many people have to pay state income taxes and check what's going on that level. And sometimes the rules are different. So what's allowable on the federal level may not be allowable on the state level, or there may be other write-off opportunities on the state level for your business. So again, check everything. Look for every opportunity. It's
Yeah.
money. It's money that you're entitled. It's the write-offs that you're entitled to take. By all means, take them. And yeah, you can go back and amend a return, but you don't want to have to
No.
go down that route. That's more effort and cost.
But you're making a really, really key point that a lot of people just don't make that connection. Like, you can earn profits in a business, or you can reduce you can increase your write-offs and then reduce your net income, and that decreases your taxes. And the bottom line is that increases your profit. And so, legitimate deductions are part of doing business and part of maximizing your revenue. And I think
Well,
that
to
simple
cer-
point is often lost on people when they look at taxes. They see a firewall between deduction and income, but they're all linked together.
Exactly. And just to kind of circle back to what you were saying with how a tax advisor can help you, something as simple as deciding if you have an S corporation, how much compensation you should take can be critical, because it will not only impact your employment taxes, but could also affect what's called the qualified business income deduction, which is a personal deduction based on your business income. So there are a lot of moving parts here, and Tax Pro can help you put it all together.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, you just hit a point that a nugget I want to bring out there, that you really need to strongly consider looking at your, the actual income, W-2 income you're paying yourself, and don't get lured into just, passing through all the income and forgetting about the payroll aspect of this. That can open up a whole hornet's nest of problems. It does hit a lot of new business owners. And again, like you're saying, Barbara, sit down with that Tax Pro.
Mhm.
Sure.
Mhm. Absolutely. Another question I thought of. So I'm 28 now. I guess I'm curious, like, what age do you recommend young adults start maybe filing their own taxes instead of giving their W-2s to their parents? Like, what age do you recommend?
Well, I think anybody who's working
Yeah,
should
anyone
be
working.
handling their own taxes and not relying on somebody else to do it, because the sooner that you become accustomed to this annual obligation, the easier it's going to be, because presumably when you're just starting out, things are rather simple. Maybe you just have
Mhm.
W-2 income and not too much else. But as life goes on, things get more complicated. So I would advise
Mhm.
the younger you are to get started on this. If you are required to file, depending on what your income is and your
Mhm.
age, then all of that I would say go for it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, maybe even in high school start doing that. Yeah, definitely. Well, Barbara, this has been a great discussion on getting us all ready for tax time. Do you have any final points you would like to share?
Yeah, I would say don't panic. Certainly
Yes.
get your records in order. If
Mhm.
you are an independent contractor, for example, your 1099 NEC forms are coming in now. If you're an employee, you're gonna be having your W-2 come in. If
Mhm.
you have processed sales on credit cards, you may be getting a 1099-K that comes in. So you want to
Mhm.
collect all of this paperwork that will be used to figure your taxes, and then decide again how you're going to proceed. Are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to have a tax pro? If you're going to have a tax pro, my advice is to make an appointment as soon as you can, because at tax time
Right.
things get very, very complicated. And
Mhm.
frankly, most tax pros do give you a questionnaire that sort of helps you organize everything for them. And
Right.
yeah, and of course, you want to find someone who is reliable. You don't want to have a ghost preparer. Those are those
Mhm.
shady people who won't sign forms and may do things that can get you into trouble.
Right.
Yeah, and you want somebody who's skilled to be able to give you good advice. And I would even add that you want someone who's going to give you advice year round, because business going forward, you may need to take actions during the year that will help you for next year's return. And so you don't want just a preparer, you want a tax advisor.
Yeah, so that really is a good point to end on, that tax advisors can stick with you year to year. I mean, I've go back well over a decade, maybe a decade and a half with my accountant, and they know your business. They know where to give you advice. They can help add a lot more value than just doing taxes at tax time. But Barbara, some great points. Well, we always like to end with one key point. I think the key point is start thinking about your taxes today if you haven't done that yet. And while you were saying that, you said, I was thinking about, my accountant gave me a checkoff list to do. I haven't even done that yet. And you mentioned, they
I
give you a
mentioned that
checkoff list.
questionnaire.
So
Yeah.
I think that'll be the first
Yeah.
thing I do this afternoon. So thanks
Same
for
here.
thanks for joining us today.
A pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. To learn more about Barbara Weltman and her book, The Home-Based Business Startup Guide, please visit bigideasforsmallbusinesses.com or our podcast website for more information on guests.
Thanks for joining us today on this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website, homebusinessmag.com.
Subscribe to our newsletter, read our book, The Home-Based Business Startup Guide. For more info, visit homebusinessmag.com or homebusinessexpo.com.
I'm Richard Kepminderson saying anchors away.
We'll talk with you soon. Until then.
Make it a great home-based tax time day.